X pattern. So we're going 1, 2, 1, 2. And we're just flowing through that motion. At some point, I'm going to start walking forward. I'm going to take 4 steps forward. He's going to take 4 steps back. So I'm walking 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we reverse. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we reverse. 2, 3, 4. Then we reverse. 2, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So we just want to start working, being able to strike and move at the same time, and move in both directions. So that's what we're going to be working on with this first part of this drill. And we're going to keep building on it. We have this as we're moving back and forth. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, the idea is that I'm looking at an X pattern. The challenge that sometimes we get into is instead we think about hitting the stick, right? If I'm thinking about making an X crosses over in a center point. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
And if I'm thinking about that X, the point of that X being somewhere around his body, then I don't have to look at his stick. I just got to make an X, and he has to make an X. And then we hit each other's stick. Does that make sense? That's one of the challenges we want to break free of, because really we're learning this to fight. We're not learning this to hit the other person's stick. Does that make sense? So I'm seeing an X. I'm looking at him directly. I don't care about his stick. It just so happens that we cross sticks because we're both doing the same pattern. Now, in FCS Kali, we have this, it's Punyo monocentric, meaning Punyo is the end of the stick, that's what I hit with. Mono meaning my hand. Does that make sense? So, we always hold our stick 4 fingers above the end. And that gives me an opportunity to use that Punyo to strike, to capture, to disarm, and then also to switch hands. Does that make sense? So now what we're going to do is we're going to hit, switch hands by grabbing and passing to the other one, and then hit, and then switch hands by grabbing above. So all we're doing is traveling above and below, above and below. Does that make sense? So we're learning how to do that hand switch. Good. He's looking at my stick again. Right? So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to start that process. If you're feeling froggy, you can jump into this idea of doing 1, 2, I'm moving forward, Jerome, 3, 4. Then he moves forward. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I move forward. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then he moves forward. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I move forward. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're adding the movement of the feet along with the movement of the hands, along with a hand switch. A lot of pieces, right? So the idea, the technical part of this when it comes down to combat is that I'm able to fight him in a very deceptive way. Because not only now does he have to worry about my movement, moving side to side, he also has to worry about my stick doing stuff, right? And then he also has to worry about hand switches in it. So you might think he's out of range, but now he's not. Does that make sense? Because I was able to switch hands. So we're learning all 3 of those things in this particular drill. Drill is not the skill. The drill builds the skill. Does that make sense? Yeah. So keep that in mind. What skill are you learning from the drill that you're doing? Because if not, you don't want to get stuck into that pretty boy or pretty girl thing where you end up doing cool moves, but you have no clue what's going on, and you sell the idea that I'm a badass, but I really don't know what I'm doing. Does that mean we're just gonna hit through, hit high 5, hit through, 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 high 5. Does that make sense? Why is this important? This is important because what it's allowing me to do is use the stick to occupy his stick, or strike, or occupy him, and then use the hand to do things too. For instance, if he has his stick out, like in fighting position, I can use this to occupy the stick. Does that make sense? Versus if I try to, either we hitting sticks, or if I try to hit out there, that's a bad idea. Does that make sense? Because he's got that stick, machete, whatever it is. So I'm going to use this to occupy that, or to attack the hand, right? And then I can move into other things. But now I'm understanding this idea of being able to throw this other hand and add this other hand in it. So again, just stationary for now. We're going top, over top of the hand, right? Top, here. Top, here, top, here, top, here, top, here. And it looks super silly at first, but once you understand it and we start to build on it, you'll really understand truly what that means for your ability to do so. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. We're getting in the habit of closing distance or pulling back, as well as throwing counterattacks, either offensive attacks or counterattacks, right? So it's that same idea. How do we pull that off in the process of going back and forth in this dance, right? And so we got a lot of pieces moving now. Both hands are moving, they're doing stuff. We have timing going on, and we're moving our feet. Now we're only going linear right now. We would never want to fight linear, right? We always want to attack the angles, right? But as we graduate to that, this is the beginning step, right? Just like if you want to get somewhere fast, you don't want to crawl, but when you don't know how to walk, crawl is a good place to start. Does that make sense? And then you learn how to run from there. Learn to stand, then walk, then run. So now it's not going over, it's going inside. So I'm going to hit, switch, and hit. Hit, switch, and hit. Does that make sense? So still the X pattern. Switch the hand, hit with the other one. X pattern, switch the hand, hit with the other one. X pattern, boom. Boom, 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 boom. There it is. It means that I'm able to occupy the stick, right? Switch a hand, boom, bang. Or it's a deception. It makes him think he's out of range. So if I swing this one, and then he thinks I'm coming back here, he's like, oh, I'm out of range right there. Does that make sense? So what I can do is I make him think, go back to right hand, I swing this one, make him think I'm coming in with that stick again, and I go, boom, get out of there like you're gonna do. Get out of range. Good. And then I switch, he's in range. Does that make sense? So it's a deception. So I go, 1. Does that make sense? So I made him think that this was coming, boom, and then it's too late. So it's a very unique deception. It's really good with changing range and messing the person's mindset up because they think one thing is coming and you've already switched it to something else. If you're ever sparring, you might even make the person think 1, 2, right? That's your right? Right? So he's like on guard for that X pattern. I do that a few times, X pattern, and then I go, right? And now he's like, whoa, it's too late, I got it. What?